Hi, my name is Rhino. I've modeled the John Hancock Center in Chicago. You can see it here. This is a finished model in Rhino. We'll show how it looks like in the V-Ray. In the background, you see Chicago, where the John Hancock Center is situated. Here's the model, the finished model. You can see it's quite similar. The windows are illuminated. It's done by transparency mapping and illumination. I will show you that later on. Okay, we'll go back to the shaded version. And here I'll show you the Grasshopper, finished model. In green. And this here on the right hand is the Grasshopper structure. I go through it step by step. In the first step, we create the basic shapes. Well, that's quite straightforward, so I go through it very quickly. You can find the information on the John Hancock Center on the internet. All the necessary information for the basic shapes, like the footprint, the height of the floor, the amount of floors, etc. You can input these in the sliders that control the components. You start with a point. You create a rectangle for the footprint. You move the rectangle, so that's the ground floor height. Well, things you don't have information on, you have to just guess from the pictures that you can find on the internet. You have to download a lot of pictures just to see how the details are. Create another rectangle. On the point here, it's the height of the building to create this main volume. And then you create a smaller rectangle to create this, I guess it's a technical space. Okay, and then you can loft. If you loft, it's always good to have the curves in the same direction, otherwise you have to flip them, and have to see more or less aligned. You have to cap them to make them solid. Okay, so you have the main volumes. As you can see here in the Rhino model, these cross beams don't have the same height. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complete cross beams with a different height, and the sixth one is only half across. So we're going to find these lines that divide these crosses. Actually, we're going to make a kind of assumption where they are, because I can't find on the internet what the real heights are. But I have the pictures. So we do this with a so-called graph mapper and a range. We define the range from 0 to 1, 6 steps. And you get this result. So you get 6 points there in this map. This is actually the conic version. You can make other versions if you like. You multiply that with an integer of 30,000. which is the height of the floors. So that's this height of the main volume. And you get this result. See, the points are ordered in this in the height of the graph mapper. It's more or less what we want. So they decrease in height towards the top. If we make planes to these points, the xi surface, the xi planes, and we intersect that with the main volume, we get rectangles. We're going to use these rectangles later on to create these cross beams. We're going to use the control points here and make connection. For that also we need a center point in here. It's the center point. We do that in step 3. If you do all these steps, these components, it's a good thing when all these curves are in the same direction and have all the points more or less aligned above each other. You see here that's not the case. This is 0, 1, 1, 1. I can look at the top, it's easier to see. Here's 1, 1, 1, 1, and then here suddenly there's a 0, and here's a 2, and there's a 3. So the last one, I think that's the 7th rectangle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, the 7th rectangle has a wrong direction, and the points are not aligned. So we have to do that, correct that. We have to make a flip. You see that now direction is correct. We have to make this point 1 go there. So we do that by changing the seam. I use this parameter as an input. So in fact we use point 3 here. This closest point. See, we have now this point 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we take all the points. See, they're all correct now. Step 3 is an interesting step. We're going to create the beams part 1, which are the first 5 beam crosses on the main volume. Because the last one is only half a cross, we're going to treat that separately. It's interesting because we're going to use several tree components. Just to switch everything off. and open the main curves. That's the curves from the intersection. The control points. As you saw in step 2, they're nicely aligned, all the same directions. We want to create triangles. The center point somewhere here. Actually, it's the intersection between these lines. Therefore, we have to split the tree structure. First, in these 2 branches, it's the positive and the negative are those branches here in red. So these are the control points, which are the items, and the branches themselves are the rectangle, and these 2. So that's 6, branch 0, branch 6 as a positive, and a negative, these red ones in between. So when you use the negatives, what you get is these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a shift. There's a shift 1 upwards. So that makes it possible to create lines in between these 2. There's other ways, but I found out that this one is the best one, because if you going to use another relative item with an offset in the branches, you're going to involve also the last one. You don't want to do that. So the notation for the split is the branches are notated in between brackets, 6 and 5, 0, 6. So that's quite simple. In the next step, we're going to create so-called relative items, which are pairs of points that have a relation. They have a certain offset in the branches and in the item. So the notation for that here is the branch. There's 0 offset in the branch, and there is a +1 offset in the item. What that means is that this 1 and 2 are related. 2 and 3 are related. 3 and 4 are related. 0 and 1 are related. And that's for all the branches that are green here. So it's a very simple notation. And we are not going to use a shift in branch, as I said earlier, because that would lead to an involvement of this last branch. And we don't want that. So we have a similar offset notation for this one, for this split. We can create lines between the points. And it's simply line A between 2 points, A and B. A is from this one, and B is 1 higher and 1 further, so that's this one. And create the other line. Oh, you get this. This is the intersection, and that's the point we need to create the triangles. When you're going to work with 3 components, it's important that if you work with them, then the tree structure of the data structure has to be the same. So if you get the data structure here, we're going to use that point to create all these triangles. There's a tree structure that looks like this. So you have branches and a sub-branch, and each one is one item. So there's 20 branches. That's 4 times around, and that times 5 is 20. So each item has its own branch. If you look at this, it's completely different. You see, here it's only 5 branches with each 4 items. It's these 2, 3, 4, 5 and 4 items, 4 control points. And it's not what you want. You want a similar one, otherwise you can't create these triangles. For that, we're going to use the path mapper. The path mapper in this case, we saw the notation earlier on with the data tree. Yeah? It's a branch plus 4 items. We're going to make that a branch with a sub-branch, and the sub-branch is the number of the item. So in this case, you see there's 4 items. Here, 0 branch, we have changed that in the path mapper. You see we get a similar data tree, data structure. With a branch that has a sub-branch, and n is 1. So we have 20 points. So each point is individual now and defined by these branches. So they're all individual. Similar thing for this one. This one is interesting. This is the -1. If you wouldn't do that, you get a tree structure like this. See, it's 0, 0, 4, 3. If you take the -1 off, you get a... Oh, I used this one here. You get a 0, 1 and a 5, 3. And that's not compatible with the data structure of the others. So you have to add the -1 to make it compatible, to make it match. You see, it's 0, 0 now, and 4, 3. So that's good. And now we can easily create the polylines. I'll switch these off to make it just better visible. The polylines that we want. We only need 3 points. Need the control point. The 4th one, it makes automatically while it closes to the triangle. Here, if it close, true. So you see, the polar line consists of the center point and 2 points from the relative items. So in total, you have 4 times 4 is 16 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 80 triangles. Is that correct? Yeah, 20, that's 80. We're going to create the offsets. Tell you why we do that. You can already see that now you get all the crosses on the right place, and you get this frame around it. As you split those offset triangles with these surfaces, you get 5 planar surfaces, and you only need to cross with the frame around it. So that's what we're going to do. So from the main volume, we're going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 4. It's 20 planar surfaces. Again, we do the split. The tree structure has to match. It's 20 branches with 1. Those are the offsets. So the individual to be split from these surfaces. The surfaces, you see also here 20 branches with one item. And these surfaces are simply made by connecting these 4 points in the corners. Again from these path mappers, which again come from the relative items. So then you make the surface split, and you get 100 values. You only need the cross here with the frame, which is 1 surface. You need 20, therefore you have to make a split again. And it's this split. So it's the 0 item, and it's all the branches. Another notation for these question marks, instead of here writing down all the branch numbers, we already did it. It's just a simpler way of notation. You're going to extrude it. Now you got the beams. Here you have the beams. And they are solid because we used a boundary surface for the extrusion. They're already solids. Okay, we have to clean it up because there's a lot of zeros in this result. I can show you that. It's a bit slow. Okay, you see here all the zeros. We have to get rid of them. You do that by cleaning it. Okay. That's it for part 1. In part 4, or step 4, we're going to create the beams on the top, which is half across. The process is more or less the same as in step 3, so we go through it rather quickly. We start with the planes from the section. We create 3 branches. Five and 6. So it's this one and this one. We loft it. Center point from this branch. Move it more or less towards the height of this point here. And again we make a section of the plane through that point with the loft, and that's a rectangle. So the control points, there are 4 control points. We're going to craft them. So they become 5 branches with each one point. So the points are made individually. I'm going to split the points, which in fact are all branches now. We take 1 point off. Branch 4, which is actually the 5th point. Similar thing here. So that leaves us with 4 branches, each 1 point. Negative. Similar thing here. Again, we make a couple of relative items, meaning we create pairs of points, pairs of items with a particular offset. The offset is +1 in the branch, and they're all branches, so it's more or less the same. So this point is connected with this point, this point with this, with this point with this point. In this case, this point with this point, this point with this point, this point with this point, and this point with this point. Similar thing for this relative item. We're going to create the polylines. Just to have the triangles, polylines. Create the offset, just like the step before, step 3. We create boundary surfaces from the original triangles. This is different than the former step, where we made a split with these surfaces, these boundary surfaces. Now we make the split with the original boundary surface of the triangle. Okay, with each split you create two surfaces. You only need one, which is the beam. In this case, this one, you don't need the inner boundary surface. So we do that with these splits. Oh. You can see here the positive one is the triangle, so the negative one is the beam shape. And then you extrude them. Switch off all the rest. Okay, that leaves you with the beams, and they're closed because they were extruded from a boundary surface. So far we've created the main volumes. The ground floor and the diagonal beams. As you can see in the Rhino model, there are vertical beams and corner beams. They have a particular shape. The shape we're going to create first, and then extrude them. We do so in step 5. Okay, step 5 we start with a red rectangle. Have to find a rectangle. There you go. There's the rectangle. Explode it. Choose one line. Choose the midpoint. Create a rectangle. Move to rectangle. Rotate it. Switch this off. Okay, and you move it to the 0 point here. For us that's easier later on to reposition it. And the other one is over here. So this is the corner beam, this is the vertical beam, with 0 point there. In the following step, 6, we're going to reposition and orient those beam profiles to specific places on the rectangles, and then extrude them downwards. So we're looking for the segments. So these are all the lines, all the curves now exploded into single lines, and make split. We're going to create vectors from a particular point on these curves to another particular point on another curve, and use these vectors as extrusion vectors. Okay, here we create branch 6 and then items 0 and 1, which are the segments. So that's 0, 1. As you can see, here's the lot of 0 results in that component. We're going to get rid of them by cleaning them. Similar thing here. Similar thing here, which is the 0 branch. So that's this rectangle, and 0 and 1 items, that is this line and this line. So in this case the items are the lines. Use the positive, so that means actually these lines. Clean them, divide them. You can see here that this is 1, 2, 3, and they're same distance in between them, so you divide them by 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Here you're going to choose the midpoints. And the midpoints are used to create the vectors. So we're going to create a vector from this midpoints to these midpoints here. I can show you that. It's this vector. That's the vector, and the anchor point is on these items here, on these 3. So there you see the vectors. This is done to make the starting point here from the beams that start here. You see? These 3 start on the top. This one starts on the 5th branch. So on this doesn't make it easier to see, but on this level. So that's on this rectangle here. Okay, we move the points there to this point with that vector. So now we have the starting points for the first and the last vertical beam. Well, these are all vectors, so you don't see them unless you make a vector display. I can do that if you want. And we start at this midpoint here. Okay. See? Vector. Very important component is the orient component, which means you can reposition a certain object to another part, another point in space, and also change the plane. The original plane was the world XI, and this is the profiles for the beams that we made earlier on. And step B plane B are these points. So they move to those points in XI plane. See what it looks like. So this isn't the corner, but these are the vertical beams. See here they are positioned. And you can see that here they are not right. They have to be rotated. Rotated along these points. Well, it's done there. Difficult to see. Okay. Other orientations are the ones that are at these points here. You can see also that these two have to be rotated. Along these points and around 90 degrees. We've created the vectors earlier on. There's these vectors. So we can do the extrusion with that vector. We have to cap them to make them solid. The other ones from there to there. Now you'll have to cap them again to make them solid. Okay, let's switch all of this off. to mirror them. I got the vertical brabs. So now we are here. See, we're quite a long way. Almost finished the model. I won't show you how to model the antennas. It's this part here. I'll maybe do that in another tutorial. It's not that difficult, but it costs a lot of time. The creation of the corner beams is quite similar to the creation of the vertical beams, so we'll go through it quite quickly. Again, we start with the planes, with the rectangles. Choose two branches. Choose the corner points, control points. So you make a vector of these 2 points. Sorry, this one. This one, you have a vector for the extrusion later on. This is the corner beam, the profile of the corner beam that we made earlier on. We're going to orient that to this point. So reposition it. Difficult to get it into the window correctly. So here you are. Remember, we choose that point as a 0 point. So that's this one on the XI plane, and we moved it to this point here. Now we've created a vector. That point to that point is going to use for the extrusion. Cap it. Mirror it. Mirror the two. Here you are. So far we've created this model in Grasshopper. Of course you can detail it much further if you like, but we keep it at this point. If you want to bring it to the Rhino environment and then render it, you have to bake the components that you have created. For instance, the diagonal beams here, if you bake it, you get this window, and you have already created a layer in your Rhino environment with the beams. You put it in there, and you can group it. So as I switch this off, you see you got the beams. So here's the finished models. I'm putting the layers. Now we will show you how we made the facade with the windows that are illuminated. So we get out of the Grasshopper. And now we're in the Rhino environment. We render this. It feels very interactive. You get this result. You see all the windows here we haven't done in Grasshopper. It's way too much work and it would cost too much memory. We've done that with transparency mapping and illumination. I think it's this part. Yeah. Okay, that's the top part, so this is different. It's a very long while. Here you are. Okay. This part, that's the material texture for the main volume. Now how do we get this texture? We used an opacity mask. It looks like this. So this is these are all the windows found on the internet. How much windows there are approximately, you can see it in the pictures. There's about 6 of them between the columns, and there is 100 floors. So then it's just a matter of calculation. Of course we didn't make that, it's too much work what we did. Just create this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 windows in between the beams. So simply, this is the graphic representation of the windows. And we place that on channel 1. And we repeated it 6 times. And then 90 stories high, so it's 90 instead of 100. And then you get this result here. Now which the black is transparent and the white parts have this color, the diffuse color. So if you make that red, so you see, you get red facade. No, we don't want to do that. We actually want to make it quite dark gray. And then we add also an emissive part after the opacity part. So when the windows are transparent, the emissive part is what you will get behind the openings. So that's this color. I made this map with custom tiles. You can change it. It's just to get the effect of different illuminations behind the glass windows. See, that's kind of similar effect what you have in the building here. So it's not uniform. So that's the pattern. And that pattern you can illuminate. And you can see on the left side that the illumination, when you increase that, you can see that in the rendered picture. So when you put this tower in a night scene, the windows will light up real beautifully. So it's just a very simple method of making illuminated windows. Well, we made a similar mapping for the top here and for the ground floor, but very basic. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you liked it.